Hello, everybody. I am Stuart Sternberg, and I am joined tonight by John Maloney and Darlene Nagy, and this is the WDW Fan Zone Show Lunatic Edition. No. uh, we're a little short. We've been a little shorthanded lately, and I think that's going to continue probably through the end of this year as people celebrate holidays, have busy plans, and have things to do. But we'll bring you as many shows as we possibly can between now and the end of the year. And I hope you'll tune in to hear what we've got to say. And on this show, we're going to discuss the Skyliner. Should Disney expand it? Should they not? Why? Yes, no, maybe so. And this was an idea that John had for us. So, John, why don't you take it away?
Well, thank you, Stuart. Well, my thought here to talk about the Skyliner was to do those two things that you mentioned, was to discuss reasons why we think Disney will expand it, and reasons why we think they might not expand it, and also to get into some additional topics, such as, okay, if they do decide to expand it, what are the implications of that? Because there's some things I think, as I was thinking about this, some things that came to my mind that I didn't necessarily think about before, and they're interesting, interesting challenges that I can see. But also, if Disney does decide to expand it, where are some of the places we think it will go to, given what its current footprint is? And also, of those choices, where did we think that they, would start first to go? So it's it's a lot of interesting things here. So I'm going to start it off, and I'm going to ask each of you, what is one reason why you think Disney will be interested in extending what they currently have? So they currently have, from, what is it, Art of Animation, and it goes up to Pop Century and over to Caribbean Beach, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So Caribbean Beach is kind of a hub, and it expands from Caribbean Beach over to Hollywood Studios in one direction. The other direction, it goes past Riviera and then up to Epcot. So that kind of covered, and so it's got some decent coverage. But we certainly have areas like Disney Springs, Animal Kingdom, Coronado Springs, the All-Star areas, the Port Orleans that don't have connectivity. So what's I'm going to start with you, Stuart.
Sure.
What's a reason why you think Disney would want to expand?
Well, can I give you two reasons why they would?
I bet you can.
Well, I think for, if you want to be eco-friendly, if you expand it more, you can reduce the number of buses you have operating on Disney property. So that would, and I think, with all the complaints I've had with the buses, and I'm not one of them, but I've heard, a lot of complaints over the last few years about the buses. The Skyliner is a people mover in a lot of respects, and would move people from one spot to another a lot quicker than waiting for a bus, having to load. And I think that's one reason. I think the other reason is, what is my other reason? I did have another reason. Let me think.
Actually, I heard three reasons right there, but keep going. Go ahead with the other one.
Oh, actually, well, yeah, I think that, I guess that was the other reason, that they could move them faster, and it's eco-friendly. So those are the reasons that I have for it.
Right. Okay. Darlene, what else do you see?
Stuart stole mine.
Sorry.
I too think that it's a very good way of transportation. A lot of the other resorts don't have connectivity for boating, which is one of the things that they could install these Skyliners to bring more people in that way, to lessen the bus people, because sometimes you're packed on those buses like sardines.
Right. And Stuart was saying that the Skyliner can move people quickly, and that was one of the things that I saw. It's got more throughput than buses.
Mhm.
Yes.
So buses, you have to wait for 20 minutes, and they can only carry so many people within that 20-minute period.
Right. But the only thing is too is as water, if it's raining, thundering, lightning, or high winds, they will not
Mm.
be running
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
So we've
yeah,
so
we're
then you are going on your buses then.
right. Yeah, we are going to talk about that, and
Yeah.
that's one of the challenges that I see
Mhm.
for Disney. But so so I agree with the throughput, and so I have this question for each of you. Do you like taking the Skyliner when it goes between the places where you want to go?
Yes.
Yes.
So so Darlene, why do you like to take the Skyliner?
Well, as you said, when I was there with the family, and I met them to transport to the parks and stuff, we waited in line for the buses for quite a long time.
Mhm.
And the Skyliner seemed to be a lot faster moving and loading
Right.
than the buses do.
In general,
Mhm.
that's my experience too. Now, there's
Yes.
certainly times, the beginning of the day, the end of the day, if you're trying to get to Hollywood Studios when they're opening, or you're trying to leave Epcot when it's closing, you can certainly get some backup. But overall,
Yes.
in the middle of the day, you still have to. I hate having to go out to the front of Magic Kingdom and wait for 25 minutes and watch bus go by after bus, and you don't even fill the bus halfway.
Mhm.
Whereas if there was a Skyliner going where you wanted to, the line's going to be short and you can get right on. Yeah,
Right.
Mhm.
yeah. One of the things, so one of the things that I was going to say for why I think they would extend it, just what we talked about there, it's very popular. And so I think you both confirm that, and I feel that way. I like to use it too. It's very popular, so I think it's a guest satisfier. And it's not that buses. Well, actually, I think it is. There are a lot of people that complain about buses, don't you think?
Yeah.
I heard you mention that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people on staying on property. We're trying to get from one place to another with a Disney bus, and this is, over the years, it's gotten worse and worse. The complaints. I'm not saying the buses have the
Mhm,
complaints.
mhm.
And like I said, I have not, except for one trip, and that was years ago. I have not had problems with any buses. But now I don't have to take the buses, so it's like I'm hearing this from other people. So I'm just taking their word for it.
I, More than 50% of the time when I'm on a bus, I'm standing because they're that full, and I make room for you know mothers with their children, or uh, people who have trouble getting around. I
Mhm.
hate to say older people, but people that have trouble getting
Sure.
around. You know, I feel, being a healthy tall person, I feel obliged to give deference to most people on a bus. But yeah, so I agree with both of you that there are challenges with buses, and yet it seems you have to wait longer for a bus.
Mhm.
In my
Mhm.
experience, there's a
Yes.
ton, and so even when the Skyliner is busiest, that's when the buses are busiest too.
Yep.
Um, did you have any other reasons why you think they would extend it, Stuart?
I don't. Uh, no, I don't have any other reasons why they would extend it other than they want to satisfy the guests that they have, but I'm not sure that's a priority for them right now.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. Uh, did you have something, Darlene?
No.
Well, one other thing that occurred to me, so I was trying to think the way that Disney thinks, or at least the way that I perceive they think. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is, where is the revenue?
Hmm.
And so one of the reasons I think that they would consider extending it is another route to Disney Springs.
Mhm.
So Disney Springs, do you? if you were staying on property, do you think you would go to Disney Springs more often if you had Skyliner access? Or do you think you would do it in the middle of the day and you don't have to worry about jumping in your car, you don't have to worry about getting on a bus? Do you think that that would make you more likely to go to Disney Springs during your trip? Darlene, what do you think?
Well, we've stayed already at Port Orleans Riverside and at Old Key West and Disney's Saratoga, which is our home resort, for that reason of being able to go to Disney Springs.
Hmm.
So yes, if I had that option, that would be like when the parks are closing at 7 p.m., like Animal Kingdom is. Now, if that was my Animal Kingdom day, I could make plans to go shopping or catch a movie or a show. Like now, Circus open again. I could go down and watch it.
Hmm. Well, what if you were staying at one of the Epcot resorts, Boardwalk or uh,
I would
Latin
still.
Beach? So it's not as you're not as close
Mhm.
as if
Well,
you're.
and that's the thing. Like right now, Epcot. I don't know if they would be able to connect Epcot to Disney Springs. It would be great if they could, but normally when we pick the boardwalk right now, because there isn't one, we focus on the boardwalk area, Hollywood Studios, um, Epcot, and going over to Swan and Dolphin.
Mhm. Well, we'll talk about this when we talk about places where we think Disney would extend,
Hmm.
and I think this is certainly one of the
Well,
prime candidates.
have you thought about logistically how they could do that? Because there are some parts, like Darlene brought up, there's some parts of Disney property where it might be very difficult for them to extend the Skyliner to get people there, even with connecting routes from one place to
But
another.
yeah, I have some thoughts on that, and that's one of the areas I want to get into. And I think there are. So I was looking at the topographical layout today and what's connected and what's not. So I have some thoughts, and I'll talk to you about them in a little bit. So I think there are. I think there are.
Mhm.
And so, for instance, from Epcot, you can get from Epcot today to the Riviera, and then, well, the Riviera, and then on to the Caribbean beach.
Hmm.
But you could extend from Riviera down to Disney Springs. So that could be a junction point to go down to Disney Springs. It's not that far. I mean,
Right.
it's not next door, but they've got lengths of the Skyliner now,
Hmm.
that are roughly that long. It's not as quick as going from, Hollywood Studios to the Caribbean beach, but
Okay,
it's
now if
doable.
you're going to extend it to Disney Springs, how would you go about it? Because if they do it, I forgot the name of the road that you would take to get to the Riviera, but doesn't that go over a highway?
Well, the Skyliner goes over. You're talking about an overpass.
Yep.
Mm.
Where there's no place to put the pillars that I can think of. I'm sure Disney Imagineers can think a lot better than I could about this because they're
Well,
engineers.
but you can go. Does the overpass go the entire? Is there a way to avoid the overpass? Are there parts where the highway comes down off of the overpass and then back down to ground level?
Yeah,
Yeah, but that's a certainly. I'm sure that Disney's already looked at that,
I'm
but
sure they
yeah,
have. And
that's
like
a
I said, they've got engineers that could
yeah,
probably figure out how to get around that.
yeah.
I mean, Animal Kingdom is like so far
Mhm.
that I can't see them really adding the Skyliner to Animal Kingdom.
Yeah. So I agree with you, Darlene.
I
I
would
think
like to
there's
see
a
them
way.
add it to the parking lot at least. Boy, it's a long walk from there.
Right?
Yeah, I think there's
Uh,
a way to get there, but it's going to get into some logistics. So,
mhm.
well, let's talk about some reasons why we think they will not extend it from what they currently have. So I'm gonna go back to start with you, Stuart. What's
Money.
That's the easy one, right?
Is it worth the expenditure to extend it for what they're, for guest usage, where it's a free service. It's
Mhm.
not a revenue maker for them. And that goes back to the buses. Unless they can cut the buses down significantly to offset the cost to build it, is it really worth it?
Yeah, well, and that's so the one place that I could think of that, or at least initially, that there would be some payback would be if they could get more traffic down to Disney Springs. Now, I mean, I think they're getting pretty good traffic at Disney Springs as it is.
Yeah, Disney Springs is really crowded.
Yeah,
Well, now it's the holiday season, but it's been really crowded, holiday season or not. And it's, Disney service doesn't cost anything to get into. So you have locals, people that are touring the area, not necessarily going to Disney, but want a little piece of Disney, so they go to Disney Springs. So you're not getting generally the same clientele. When I say clientele, people that are there for the week to go to Disney. They might be there to go to Universal, taking an evening out to go to Disney Springs just to get a little bit of Mickey in.
yeah, yeah.
So is it really worth it for them? And I'm sure Disney's analytical team has gone over this and over this and over this.
Well, so why do we think they put the Skyliner up in the first place? I mean, they could have continued to use buses. Did it save them any money in putting the Skyliner up?
I
Yeah, go ahead, Darlene.
I want to say that the reason they did the resorts they did was because of the amount of guests that were staying at those resorts to alleviate the, s- pardon the way I say it, but the congestion of those buses and how long it takes to get on. Because if you're going to wait in line for a bus for an hour and a half, it makes no sense.
Right. Well, I agree that the Pop Century, Art of Animation, Caribbean Beach have a lot of people, but
Hmm.
so do the Port Orleans resorts and certainly the All Star resorts.
And I'm sure they studied all those other resorts, and maybe they're trying this out first to see if it's worthwhile.
Hmm.
They
Um,
could.
and remember, we went into a pandemic shortly after the Skyliner opened,
Right. Right.
and that may have changed their way of thinking drastically, at least for the foreseeable future, not
Right.
necessarily for
Right. Right.
down the line.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's certainly the biggest reason to think that they
Yeah.
won't. But as we say, there was a reason for them to put it up in the first place. So, um,
And I think Darlene nailed the reason why they put it up in the first place.
mhm. uh, any other any other reasons why you think that they wouldn't pursue it? Darlene, do you have something different or?
The only other reason I could think that they wouldn't do it is to not put more cast members out of a job.
Yeah.
Because if you think of it, the Skyliner is probably ran by a handful of mechanical engineer people that maneuver, the different lines and making sure. Whereas you don't have so many bus drivers because you probably need, 3 shifts or 4 shifts of bus drivers, and you probably have about 10 buses that you're running at like opening and closing of the day. Not as many during the day, but
Well, and isn't that also a reason why they might consider it? So we talked about what are the financial reasons for doing it, and if they can cut down on the number of cast members, they
yeah.
don't have as many bus drivers, and I think and I think one of the big challenges. So if they expanded it resort wide, where you could get to just about anywhere, I think that becomes a big challenge to your point earlier, Darlene, you need to have a mode of transportation when there's lightning, when there's
Hmm.
wind. in the times that they have to stop the Skyliner, or they have a system downtime because of electrical issues or whatever. So
Mhm.
so I can see it being a really big challenge for Disney to manage a bus fleet and drivers and have them quickly available if there was a system-wide shutdown and you had connectivity beyond what they currently have.
Right.
Well, I can give you another reason why they might not do it, and it goes back to the buses. It takes a long time to train a bus driver. They have to go. It's a different pay scale when they're going through training,
Mm.
and a lot of them can't afford to get paid that amount, waiting to get a larger amount once they completed their training. And that's not Disney's doing. That's a Florida state law. If I'm not, now I could be wrong about that, but that's my understanding. And if you train these bus drivers and you need them more for, let's say, July, August, September, and then you don't need them, let's say you need them 6 months out of the year and you don't need them the other 6 months. What happens in those 6 months? You're going to lay them off and hope they come back?
Mm.
Look what's going on now. After they close for a short period, it's very difficult to get their employees back.
Right.
Just look at those tramps sitting there.
Yeah, that's right. That's a perfect example. Look how long it's taken them to get that back.
Right. And that is such a, a challenging trade-off, because the Skyliner helps you alleviate some of that, but it causes trouble because when the Skyliner's not working, you need a replacement. And I think that was one of the most, as I was thinking about this, that was the toughest nut to crack that I could see, is how do you fill in for the times when the system goes down or it can't run.
Well, they have to take bus drivers from other parts of the property to cover, there, and then you have upside guests because the bus drivers can't be everywhere.
But how can you maintain enough quantity of buses and drivers? So it costs you a lot of money to have them sitting there, and we all know, if you don't have the Skyliner, we all know how many buses it takes to get to all the resorts and all the parks, and to have that level ready to go at any given time, if you've got a broader Skyliner, I think it just seems impossible to do.
Yeah.
At least very costly, where they're throwing money away because they're just sitting there idle, and we
Well,
know
I
they're not
think
going to do that.
I think there is a solution to this, but it is a very expensive solution, and I'm sure Disney thought of this, and that's why they went with the Skyliner. But it would have been to extend the monorail wherever they could.
Mhm.
But that would cost megabucks more than the
Yeah.
Skyliner
Well,
to build
but
and maintain.
the monorails, there's times when you have outages in the monorail too,
Yeah, that's true.
and the connectivity of the monorail is relatively limited right now.
Mhm.
So Disney has a big bus fleet, and they can absorb those, smaller outages. If they expand the Skyliner, I think it gets to a scope where you almost can't fill in, because it's not something you can plan. An outage is not something you can plan.
No.
In all reality, I wish they would have just built the monorail throughout the entire resort. But I know how expensive that was,
Yeah.
so that's why they did not do it, and they went to the buses.
Mhm. Yeah. And again, it's very expensive. And what are your options when you can't run it?
Mhm.
And so the buses are very flexible, I think, but you have to maintain a lot of cast members to drive the buses, to maintain the buses, um, and then you have to maintain a large fleet, and
Mhm.
so that's a real tough trade-off, I think.
Well, if Disney said, you know what, we've polled our guests, they said they want the monorail expanded and they're willing to pay for it.
Oh, well.
It's there were
Who are they talking to for that money?
well, that's the whole
Elon
thing.
Musk?
I think I think you would get some guests that say, yeah, you know what, you want to raise the cost for my vacation, we'll do it, we'll spend more money, we'll just do it. But there are going to be a lot of people that are going to say, no, don't. It's but I don't think Disney's looking at it from that standpoint. I think they're looking at it purely from a profit standpoint. And if
Mhm.
it's going to cost them so much money that it's going to affect their bottom line where they can't recover from it, they're not going to do it. And that goes with the Skyliner. That goes with anything.
You're
Yeah.
so right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we forget that Disney is a for-profit company sometimes, but we shouldn't. They're in the business to make
I
money.
don't forget that very often.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to criticize Disney for this because it's not Disney. I mean, I've seen this in so many different industries in so many places, so many times where they're penny wise and dollar foolish. They look at what's in front of them at the moment and they try to fix it as best they can, but they're not looking at the future. And I think Disney takes a very different aspect. I think they are looking towards the future and making a bigger profit as they go forward. And they're not going to spend something to put a band-aid on it to fix it today when they can do something that's going to be real and worthwhile 10 years, 20 years down the road. I think that's really what they're shooting for.
Right. So long as they've got the available revenue to get it going. I mean,
Mhm.
they only have so much investment they can use per year, and some years are less.
And
Like
look what the
last year.
pandemic did
Right.
to them as
Right.
far as their bottom line goes. It really, not just everybody, but it really affected Disney.
Yeah.
You're seeing the crowds now, but what's the capacity? Disney's not letting us know. Is it 100% of 100%, or is it 75% of
Yeah.
100%?
Well, I doubt that it's 100% if they don't have
Right.
all of the resorts open.
Right.
Okay. Anything else before we get into
Yes.
taking a next step
Something
as
very important. Something really
uh-oh.
important.
Oh, yes.
You can't forget about this. You
Somebody
want
else
to
to
go to
help you
Disney
get around.
World, Disneyland, whether you want to take the Skyliner or the monorail or bus, take your own car, take a plane or a train. It's got to be Mouse Fan Travel, the very best at travel planning. So if you want to go to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, an Adventure by Disney, or Disney Cruise, forget the rest. Stick with the very, very best Mouse Fan Travel. They've got a great bunch of discounts going on right now, and they do things your way. And as I say all the time, the only way. Your budget, your vacation, the way you want it, how you want it, when you want it. And that's Mouse Fan Travel, the very best experts in anything and everything travel, even if it's not a Disney vacation. They'll help you get where you want to go, when you want to go. And you can find out everything about Mouse Fan Travel and all the great, great deals they've got going on at www.mousefantravel.com. That is www.mousefantravel.com. And tell them the zone sent you, please. WW fans.
Well done.
Oh, one more thing. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It'll help us out greatly, and I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. So we've talked about reasons why we think that Disney would consider expanding it. We've talked about why they might not consider doing it. One other idea I had thought about, something that would be a big challenge to expanding it, or could be something not as positive, and that is when I looked at expanding it, and we'll talk.
Colin, are we keeping you up?
No, I think I need eye drops though.
No. You're going to be like this one over here.
Hey, Bernie, wake up, Bernie.
Wake him up. Not now.
Oh,
What were you doing?
So one of the other thoughts I had that is something that could be somewhat of a negative for expanding it is if you look at the places where you would expand. So if you want to go to Disney Springs, you want to get over to Animal Kingdom, it makes it more complex for the guest to get around, because we already know now if you want to go from Hollywood Studios to Epcot, you have to get on one line, get off, and get onto another line to get there. Well, if you
Mhm.
start adding other connections on, you could end up stopping at multiple hubs before you get to where you're going. So
True.
it'd be a little more complex for people to understand. Uh,
Mhm.
Disney World's tough for people to understand that are new to it now. The number of parks, the number of modes of transportation, uh, the things like Genie Plus and fast. I'm sorry, the lightning lanes and all of that. There's so many things that guests have to learn that would make it a little more challenging. So I think that would be a bigger strain on their guest relations and more confusing for the guests the harder or the broader the network becomes.
It's too bad Disney didn't build a people mover, not an attraction in Magic Kingdom, but a people mover to get you from one place to the other throughout the entire property. I think that would have been a good solution if this were done, when the parks initially opened and expanded. But to do
And the
that now,
highways and everything weren't
yeah,
where they are now. Yeah.
Yeah, you still might have to change lines, change connections, whatever you want
Mhm.
to call it, change routes.
Do that with the train if
Yeah,
you're going to work.
yeah,
So,
right. And it's just a different experience. So I think it's just one of those big challenges that Disney would have to deal with should they decide to expand things. The more complex the network, the more complex it is to navigate it.
Now, do you think they'll expand somewhere down the road?
Well, so let's hold off on whether I think we can do that to wrap up. I think we can each say, do we think that they will or won't? We talked about why they might not. We talked about why they might. I'd like to talk about, where we think they would go and where we think they would go next if they do move forward, and then we can wrap it up and say, okay, after all of that, do we think they will? So let's hold off on that till the end. So Darlene, where where is a location that's not served by the Skyliner now that you think Disney would consider adding on to the Skyliner network?
I think the most obvious place would be Animal Kingdom
And why do you say that?
because it's only has a bus route
Hmm.
or your own personal mode of transportation or Uber.
Right.
And I know people that have taken an Uber.
Okay. And now to get to Animal Kingdom, uh, so I thought about Animal Kingdom as well, but I actually, me not being an engineer, but me thinking about the way that they currently have things now for connecting and just looking at a topographical map, it looks to me as if they would have to stop first at Coronado Springs
That's what I was thinking.
before
Hmm.
getting to Animal Kingdom. I don't know. Again, I'm no engineer, but the distance and you would think if they're going to go as far as Animal Kingdom, that they would want to be able to pick up some additional locations on the way,
True.
which it seems that Coronado Springs is right there in the middle,
Hmm.
so you could get them both.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I was thinking about with Animal Kingdom is I don't think it's one stop. I think it's two.
Hmm.
And that's what they do with buses today. They have a
Mhm.
bus stop at the Jumbo House, and they have a bus stop at
At the
Kidani.
Kidani,
Right.
correct.
So if you had one stop at Animal Kingdom, you'd either have to get on a bus from the other lodge to that lodge, or most people will not walk that, or
No.
you wouldn't get to the Skyliner. So
Right.
so I would think if they go to Animal Kingdom, it seems that they would have to have two stops, which makes the whole route a little more complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. It could be a pass through. You can, if you got on at Kidani, you could go through Jumbo House. You wouldn't have to get off. You wouldn't have
Correct.
to change,
No.
but they'd have to have another stop.
Hmm. Just like you get asked at Riviera, do you want to stay on or get off?
Right. Stuart,
Mhm.
What's a location that another location you were thinking?
I think Disney would first look at the deluxe resorts that do not have access to the monorail. I mean, I think the Port Orleans resorts, the French Quarter and Riverside are also the places they would consider. But I think they would first consider the deluxe resorts that do not have access
Well,
to the monorail
where's a deluxe
or
resort?
walking distance to the parks. Well, you've got the beach club, the yacht club.
Well, but they have access to Skyliner.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Animal Kingdom Lodge does not.
That's true.
I think.
Wilderness Lodge.
Yeah,
Well, that's a moderate now.
well, so, but
They have boat service though.
yeah, they have
Yeah,
boat
they do.
service. So, Wilderness Lodge, you'd have to first get the Skyliner to go.
They'll do it over water. Imagine getting stuck on it.
Yeah. Well, and then you also have to deal with the track of the monorail.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Magic Kingdom area is the last place they would go, unless they decided to replace the monorail between Epcot and Magic Kingdom with the Sky.
Not doing that.
I wouldn't think so either, but that's the only way that I would
Yeah.
think that they might do Magic Kingdom.
I don't
So,
foresee that happening, but
Mhm.
well, I don't think it's out of the question, and the monorail gives them challenges. They had the monorail shut down between Epcot and Magic Kingdom for quite a while.
They did, but
Um,
there were reasons for that.
yeah, well, yeah, but I don't know what their maintenance costs are, and it's a long stretch of track. Um, I don't know. If it ever got to a point where the the concrete on those pilings needed to be redone or needed to be reinforced. I don't know what the lifespan of those concrete towers is.
Well, how about the Skyliner cables? What's the lifespan of those? When will they need to be replaced?
Yeah, well, they're going to. They're going to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like an elevator cable. They have to they have to be inspected and replaced
Well,
every now and
yeah,
then.
right, right. But I think replacing the cable is a less time-consuming thing than replacing concrete towers or refurbishing concrete towers.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not an engineer. That's just my thought. I could be way off base.
no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we had talked about Disney Springs. So we're not quite sure about the towers to get there from Stewart's. You talked about Animal Kingdom. We talked about Coronado at the same time. We talked about that. What about All Stars? What do you think? Do you think Disney would consider All Stars?
I think that's far back on their list of things to consider. But if they're going to expand it, it's going to be on the table for them.
Right.
Now, I want to go back to Disney Springs just for a second.
Mhm.
As a guest staying at a resort, how do I know Disney is going to ensure that somebody who's not a guest at the resorts are going to get on the Skyliner and go back to the resort and maybe have some ill-gotten intentions?
You mean going from
For security reasons. If I'm a guest on a Disney resort, I would love to have the Skyliner to go to Disney Springs, but I don't want somebody who's not staying at the resort to be able to hop on a Skyliner and come to my resort.
Well, you can do that now from Epcot and Hollywood Studios. You can go to Riviera.
Mhm.
I was gonna say that.
I know.
You could walk out of Epcot and get on
Yep, the
the
International Gateway.
Skyliner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Even Hollywood Studios when
Yeah.
you're going to get on. They don't ask for room
Yeah,
reservations
but
or
if you're
dining reservations.
but the you're getting you're not getting the same people going to the parks that go to Disney Springs.
Well,
You're
right,
getting
the
people
people
in
that are
Disney
going to the
Springs
parks
who are
have
there for
already paid to get there.
yeah,
Right.
that's
And
right.
they've, if they didn't stay at a resort, they may have had to pay to park
So
on top.
I wanna go to a resort and break into someone's room? What's the easiest way to do it? You go to Disney Springs, hop on a bus.
Well, so there's an interesting question. If the Disney
Now, I'm
Springs
not saying this is going
connect,
to happen. This is just
no,
hypothetical.
no, but I think it's an important question. So if Disney added the Skyliner connection to Disney Springs, do you think that they would have a security access point?
I think they'd have to.
Springs, yeah.
I think they would have to.
Now they don't. They don't if you're getting on the Skyliner outside of the International Gateway.
No.
I mean, most of the people that are there were either came from Epcot or they came from one of the resorts in the Epcot area
Right.
around Crescent Lake, but you could have gotten there other ways. So, but it could be a reason to put one there at Disney Springs, and they try to do that now with the monorail resorts, that you go through security to get onto the monorail, so you don't have to go through security again when you
Yep.
get to the Magic Kingdom. So it's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's an important. I think that's an important consideration. So where were we with the All Stars? Whether we think I think they're way down on the list.
Yeah.
It could move a lot of people. I think that's one reason. But the other thing that we have to think about is the more that Disney would add on to the network, the more people that are going to be in those central routes, like getting to Epcot and the Hollywood Studios. So the more endpoints there are, the more people that are going to be in those central routes then as well. So I think Disney has a maximum throughput. Certainly, they can't speed the cars up. I don't know that they're going to put more cars on. So I think they have to be careful about the number of people in the network altogether too. So I think that's another limiting factor they have to pay attention to as they start to connect things. So it might be problematic to put some of these large resort areas onto it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Any other places that anybody has that we haven't talked about? I don't have anything else on my list. We talked about Epcot to Magic Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think
Mhm.
it's all that likely, but I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility either. Okay. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about with Disney Springs, and this gets back to the same question though about how many people can this whole network sustain. With the airport connector coming to Disney Springs, would people look at going from the airport to Disney Springs and jumping on the Skyliner to get to their resort?
What would you do with your luggage though?
Why couldn't you take it on the Skyliner?
Then you're taking up spaces where people could.
You are. Yeah, right. So that's an implication.
stand.
That's an implication
Yeah.
of doing that. Yes, absolutely. And there's cases where you probably couldn't get your whole family onto one car.
Yep. And if I'm Disney and I'm looking at that, my answer to that would be, and this is just from a business perspective, I'm not going to do it, because if you're going to have people jumping on the Skyliner with loads of luggage, it's not worth the amount you're paying to build it to transport these people.
Yeah,
Put them on a bus.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And I don't think that the network could sustain that added load.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe
weight capacities too.
We've just talked ourselves out of putting Disney Springs on there because we've got people that have got bad intentions. We've got too much volume, and we've got people coming from the airport and their luggage.
Well, the thing is that you can fit 6 people on there on a Skyliner. But if you're talking people coming with luggage, and say people come with something that's over 50 pounds, then you got to start adding up. You have to know
The
luggage weight.
Right. Well, my sense is though a piece of luggage is going to take up as much space as a person, and the luggage is going to weigh less than a person anyway.
But the Skyliner is not meant to be a luggage mover.
No,
No.
I agree. I agree. So I think you're right there. I think you're spot on.
I mean, it's one thing. Oh, sorry. One thing to make a carry-on for the day, go
Well,
with you, but
yeah.
not,
So,
not your
well,
huge
also here's
suitcase.
another idea though. So Disney wants you to get in their parks and start spending money.
Mhm.
So what if Disney had a service at Disney Springs with buses, kind of like what they had with Magical Express, where they had buses that would take your luggage to your resort, and it was only you that got on the Skyliner, and then you got into the parks faster and started spending money on lunch, started buying gifts.
Okay. How much is it going to cost to manage that system, to pay employees to handle that system, and how much are you going to charge guests to do that for them? They're not going to give it to you for free. And
Well,
even if they don't, even if there's no cost and charge, they're going to add it on to your resort stay, whether you use it or not.
right. Well, so that's where the actuarials, I think, would look and say, how much added revenue can we get by getting people into the parks faster and not hang? So some people today, I think, they go and they hang out at their resort, waiting to get into the room, and it takes them a while to get to the parks. And so I think there's an argument that could be made that they are spending less money. They're not starting spending money as soon. I'm not saying it's clear cut, but I think there's an argument there.
Now, just from a kind of joking standpoint, how many Uber and Lyft jobs are you going to lose or cause people to lose money and revenue that it's an Uber driver or Lyft driver by not allowing them in if you're providing that service?
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm joking around about that. But
Well, so I think it would get down to what is the volume of that would occur. So I, I don't think Disney cares so much about Uber and Lyft, other than that
no, I don't think they do at
other
all.
than they can fill gaps. And so that's I think that's another outlet where if the system goes down, Uber and Lyft comes in and helps fill some of that gap. Now, Uber and Lyft right now, there's less availability of them, just like there's less availability of workers in all industries. But when they're at full capacity, I think they help Disney by stepping in and covering some of that, adding capacity. If the Skyliner's down, the buses are overloaded, guests can turn to Uber and Lyft to help fill that hole. And once the minivans come back, they also do the same thing. Yeah. An interesting patchwork. Well, so we've talked about a lot of that, and I think we've had a lot of discussion there. Before we go and talk about whether we individually think Disney will or won't expand, is there anything that we didn't talk about that anybody wanted to add?
Other than, will they or won't they? No.
I think it's pretty interesting, some of the things we got into. You guys had some great insights there.
Mhm.
So, Darlene, what is your thought about? Let's make it simple. Do you think they will expand at all?
I think they will once they get done with their other projects and see how things flow.
Okay.
Because I know they're working on different aspects of the parks and stuff right now and building different things that we don't know really what they are. So I think in the future, if there is a way to expand it, they will, because I think that is one of the more reasonably priced options for them
Well, it's free.
to do it.
Well, it's free for us. I'm sorry.
It's free for us, but again, I'm going back to the
Right. To
point that
right,
they
the
don't need a
cost for
lot
them.
of yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's one yes. Stuart, what do you think?
All right. I'm going to give you a non-answer answer.
Oh boy, here comes a. You tell me this is a
I
lawyer
think
answer.
I
I'll
think
try not to snore through it.
yeah. I think it's possible they will expand in the future. Yeah, I
That's
think
not
it
committal.
depends on the revenue stream that's coming into Disney that would allow them to expand it. If they see that they could get away with a 20% or a reduction in bus service of 20% or more by building a Skyliner and then have the bus drivers cover when there's wind that causes it to close or rain that causes it to shut down for a period of time, I think they would consider it. And I'm sure they've gone over these numbers over and over and over again. But I don't think it's the only mode of transportation that they're considering expanding in the future. And
Right.
I think they're going to do whatever they think is the most feasible, not just monetarily, but what will work best for their company.
Mhm.
And that could be the Skyliner, and it could be an expansion of buses, or maybe even the monorail down the road. We don't know. I don't think anybody can predict that. And Darlene, going back to your projects, when does Disney finish with any projects? They finish one, they've got 3 or 4,000 more to go.
Okay. Now,
I'm not criticizing you for that.
you opened up this can of worms. Disney takes their time building things so
Yes.
they don't have issues legally with things falling down around them.
Yes, that's very true. That is true. They do things the right way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that is something that to consider too.
So we've got one yes and one abstention.
Well, I didn't abstain.
I,
Do I think they could do it? Yes,
well,
I do
no,
think they can
I guess.
expand. Will they? I don't know.
Well, I guess my question is, based on the things you said, the factors that would impact it. How do you think those factors will play out? Do you think they'll play out in such a way that they will expand or not?
I think if they do expand it, it's going to be baby steps. They might add one resort here or there, and another location here or there, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, or or anything that's going to be major beyond adding something. When I say simple, nothing's going to be simple with adding something on, but I don't think you're going to see it going to Disney Springs anytime soon. I don't think you're going to see it going to Animal Kingdom because it's so far out of the way. I think if you see an expansion, it's going to be on the existing line just to add something else on, and where that will be, I don't know.
Yeah. No, fair enough. I don't want to push it too hard.
That's all right.
Yeah. So for me, my thought, and it's similar to what you said about baby steps. I think they will do it. I think it will be incremental. I don't think it's going to be big either. I think it will be incremental. I've got my questions about Disney Springs too, but one place that I think might be reasonable is Coronado Springs. And so Coronado Springs, they've got the Grand Destino Tower, so they've got kind of a deluxe resort in the middle of a moderate, and also it's a way to get people that are there at a convention from the Coronado Springs more easily into the parks. So I'm thinking that they will, and I'm thinking it will be incremental. And one of the options, a possible option, I think, is Coronado Springs, because it's not a big ad, and I think it might get some value for them by doing it.
Something I want to mention to you about Coronado Springs, because I know people, I have family members that have been there for conventions. They do not usually have the time to go to the parks. So to get them into the parks, I don't think that's anything Disney would consider.
I disagree because I've been to many conferences down at Disney World, and it's a priority for me to get to the parks. And
But
I
you're a Disney fan, so
well,
yes, it is a priority for
well,
you.
I agree, but I think a reason a lot of people try to go well, that's why Disney has conferences because they know that they're attractive. It's not just because it's a nice convention center, but because they know that people like the product and they want to combine their experience at the convention or conference with Disney.
You know who has the answer to that? Whether the number of conventioners that go to the parks and how often they go and how much money they spend there? Disney Analytics. They have the answers to
Oh
all those
well, yeah,
questions.
yeah, yeah. They know well, all of this is conjecture and
Yep.
thought on our part. So that's my thought. I'm thinking that they. Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. There's a lot of interesting twists here, and
Mhm.
we got everybody's opinion. So
You didn't get Bernie's opinion.
Tell
Bernie's the dog
me
that.
not to call him.
If you're not watching us on TalkShoe or YouTube, Bernie's my dog laying right here, fast asleep. He had a rough day. No one was home today, so he slept all day. All right, so we're gonna end this conversation right now. We could pick it up at another time. We will be back early next week with a news and events edition, and we'll be back. I think we're going to do a Disney Christmas show next week. I don't know what the topic will be exactly or how we'll discuss it, but we'll do something festive for the holidays.
Sadly, I won't be there.
You're probably better off. So, no, we'll see. I'm sure it'll be a decent show. All right. So until next time, everybody, please be safe. I hope everybody's getting ready for the holiday season, and that's the reason you need to be particularly very safe. Just be careful, please.
Mm-hmm.
So until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks for taking this trip on the Skyliner with us. We hope you come back, and next time you come back, bring a friend with you. Good night.
Have a magical night. Stay safe and think about everyone you're around.